Welcome to the Deliverance Project. Here are your hosts, Anthony and Melissa.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Deliverance Project. I'm your host, Anthony.
Hello, I'm Melissa.
We're so glad that you're here with us tonight. We are broadcasting from a very extremely cold Colorado night. It is about 0 degrees and getting colder, so we hope that wherever you are staying warm. Again, we're glad that you've chosen to spend your evening with us. We just want to take some time to kind of let you know who we are and what we do here, and then we're going to jump right into the episode. So here on the Deliverance Project, we just simply have one goal. We want to help people who are in the midst of spiritual warfare. Now, that comes in many forms, and that could be as simple as somebody who's just struggling, maybe can't quite feel right. Like there's something going on. They can't quite put their finger to it, but they feel like it's maybe beyond something that's a temporary or a permanent mental health issue. It's maybe something that they can feel as a spiritual issue. And that can go all the way up to somebody who feels they're possessed. And we actually have a story tonight about somebody who is on the very far extreme of that spectrum.
Yeah.
But we're here to help. And so what we want to do is we want to create a safe place here where people can call in with their secrets, with their shame, with their issues, with what is going on with them in a place that's judgment free. You know, before we decided to record, we were having a correspondence with somebody on social media, and they were talking about how they are having some struggles with a spirit that they feel is tormenting their young child, I think a baby. And so we're hoping we can get them to kind of continue to join us. But we don't always have to put your story on the air. We're here to help you regardless.
Yeah, exactly.
But we want this to be a safe place where you can let us know what's going on, and we can pray with you. We can offer you advice. We do have to admit that this is a Christian podcast, and we are going to pray with you and pray that you find the loving grace of Jesus Christ that we believe is what saves us from any form of spiritual warfare. So if that's something that you feel like intrigues you or interests you, you're in the right place. And for some of you new listeners, we thought maybe we would give a little recap of who we are. So my name is Anthony Corelli. I am a retired minister and therapist. I am an author. I've written a trilogy of books entitled The Struggle Series. And these books are kind of horror novels. And I get a lot of grief from Christians because Christians shouldn't write horror novels, but that's not necessarily true.
Right?
These books are full of the gospel message, but the purpose of me writing them is I was noticing that people have a big fascination with the paranormal and with possession, but everything in the media or on, in the movies is always about the kind of the Catholic perspective from a priest.
Yeah.
And those of us who are, evangelical Christians, we kind of have something we call deliverance ministry, thus the Deliverance Project. And we don't really do exorcism, although those terms can be interchangeable.
Yeah.
And so I wrote these books to try to reach that audience and to teach people that there is hope in Jesus Christ for people who have, found themselves, in the grip of a demonic spirit or an evil entity. I am somebody who has helped thousands of people in my career as a minister, as a therapist. My job didn't always just include preaching, although it was one of the things I enjoyed to do. I really love to sit down with people one way or the other and help them. And during the course of that, on way more occasions than I wanted it to be, people would come in with spiritual attachments. I performed my first deliverance when I was 17 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I have kind of always had that as a unexpected, under the surface kind of profession, to the point to where that's one of those things where when you start doing that, you kind of get a lot of word of mouth and that type of thing. So throughout my life, that's something that I have done, is prayed for people. I don't have the power to deliver people from demons. I simply have the ability to introduce you to this Jesus that we talk about, and he is the one that can save you. And so I've just been fortunate enough to get in the mud with people and pray with them and help them to find deliverance. And so the purpose of us being in this place right now is Melissa and I are a little older, hitched up now. We were neighbors who have now become a couple, and we are people that have some free time. And we decided, what kind of ministry could we do? And I started this on my own, and then Melissa quickly jumped on board. And we are just here to help you. So that's who I am. That's where my heart is. When I say I'll get in the mud with you, I will get in the mud with you. There's no judgment here. I am a pastor who's fallen from grace, so there's no judgment for me. As a matter of fact, I've been judged by so many people that I don't have room or time or energy to judge anybody, because I simply have a heart for people who have been there and made mistakes or found themselves, accidentally, on purpose or otherwise, under a big spiritual attack. And so that's what I do. That's why I do what I do. And I'll let Melissa tell you about herself.
Oh, wow. How can I follow up after that? I'm not that exciting. Well, my name is Melissa Corelli, and I just love helping people, the same as what Anthony was saying, people that are struggling with spiritual warfare. I'm always praying for people throughout my daily life. Like if I see someone standing on the street corner with a help me sign, I pray for them to, help them throughout their day, to keep them safe. And, hopefully, they're blessed throughout the day for whatever they need, for struggling moms in the grocery stores with infant in the car seat and the stroller, and then one kid crying because they want a toy and she's struggling not to lose her mind, in the store. And just to, helping people to accept, Lord as their savior. And how amazing that feels, with your journey, with your faith. In some of our previous episodes, I've shared some of my struggles and how God has been with me, throughout it all. Like I've never turned my back on God, and He never turned His back on me. And it never crossed my mind once to. Of course, I'm angry at Him. It's like, why did this have to happen? Like, come on, I've been good. Get me out. And just, throughout my journey is, I think I've learned how to have more compassion for people. You never know how they got where they are. So most definitely we're a couple that does not judge people, and just working on my, the power of forgiveness, in people and in myself. And, I like to make people laugh. I like to do crafts. And we have two cute, amazing dogs that we just bought their first pair of snow boots, their snowshoes.
Yeah, try to put shoes on a
On the
dog.
dog. And it comes with instructions. That was really funny. So day 1, you do this, and day 2, you do that. But actually, the instruction works because they're getting close
They're getting
to
there for
putting
sure.
them all 4 on instead of 1 and trying to chew it off or take it off.
Yeah, and definitely. Melissa has the most infectious laugh, if you haven't heard and can't tell. And she's definitely somebody with a servant's heart. But what I would say is we are two imperfect people. If you are one of those Christians that expects us to be reverent, and we're not ridiculous, but if you expect us to be perfect and flawless and pious and all that stuff, this is just not the place for you. As a minister, I pretended too long, and now I'm just somebody who's real. So I get along better, and Melissa gets along better with, probably the people that most churches would shy away from. We tend to be more people that believe in, the imperfection being something that people don't have to hide with us. And so two imperfect people that want to bring you some prayer, maybe a little education, and just definitely make a safe place for you to tell your story. And I want to say this too, because an interaction I had today on social media, when I say tell your story, that doesn't mean I think it's a bullshit story.
Right.
That just means that it's your personal story. It's your truth. And it didn't dawn on me, except for this interaction I had with somebody where they said, this is not a story. This is happening in real life. And I didn't mean it as a fictional story. I just meant when you have something to tell, it's your story to tell. And I believe you, Melissa believes you. You'd be hard pressed to shock us, let alone us having trouble believing you because of just who we are and what we've been through. So what I want to do is just say, give us a try. give us a couple
Hmm.
weeks. If you liking what you see, it's always great to go back to season 1,
Hmm.
because I basically did a foundational piece about what we believe here,
Hmm. That's
and
great.
some kind
Very
of little
educational.
theology.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely so. And we're going to get to that a little bit tonight. But what we want to do in tonight's episode is just kind of outline this topic. Now, we are going to read a letter from a listener that I believe is going to outline one of the most horrific experiences a person can have.
Hmm.
Um, Melissa, when we were kind of going over show notes and she saw the letter, we were talking about, well, what do you think? And Melissa said, man, this is about as scary as it gets. And
Like,
sometimes I have to remember that, because I've seen so many things that maybe some of you haven't.
uh-huh.
What maybe I'm kind of numb to these things. But
Yeah.
when I went back and read it again, it's pretty terrifying.
It
It
is,
really
and it's
is.
just heartbreaking, and yeah, it's traumatic experience, that's for sure.
It's absolutely traumatic. And so, what I want to do is just give you an idea of what this person went through by giving you a brief education of the concept or the being known as a succubus. So what is a succubus? I would venture that a lot of you listening have at least heard of this topic or of this being called the succubus. And maybe some of you, uh, like I've heard in the past, people confuse what is the difference between an incubus and a succubus.
Mhm.
Well, let's make this real simple. Basically, a female demon who is believed to have sexual contact with a man is called a succubus.
Mhm.
So it's an
Okay.
evil spirit, a demonic entity that has sexual contact with a man. And in the similar fashion, an incubus is what's considered a male demon who is believed to have sexual contact with a woman. Now, I'm not real sure about whether demons have a gender or not,
Mhm.
but I definitely think that that's a possibility. Um, I am somebody who sees demons from time to time. I've seen
Mhm.
for most of my life, but I've never noticed any genitalia that would tell me that.
Well, yeah.
But I
Mhm.
have had experiences, and I'll outline one of those in a while, where I felt that the demon was at least presenting itself to be a female and
Or a
not a
male.
male.
Mhm.
And then at other times, although you couldn't say why, you feel like you want to call it a he and not a she.
Mhm.
But even in my writings, I do my best, although sometimes for artistic value, I will put a male or a female on it. But most of the time, I try to refer to him as an
As
it,
in it, yeah.
because I don't really feel like giving him too much of an identity anyway. But regardless, that is what the definition of a succubus would be.
Mhm.
Now, I would say that this is a concept that most people have heard about, because there are countless people throughout history, and I'm going to say that word history, that have
Yeah.
complained about having encounters with this type of entity.
Mhm.
So much so that you can go back to like some of the earliest recorded history, and these types of beings are being talked about. So if you go back to about 2400 BC, ancient Mesopotamia, they were writing and talking about an entity called Lilu or Litlu or Liltu, excuse me.
Mhm.
This demon was said to seduce men in their dreams. Now, when most people think about a succubus or an incubus because of Hollywood,
Yeah.
they say that a demon is
Mhm.
having sex with you when you're awake. And although that can happen, and in the story we're going to read, we're going to hear about some of that, the majority of this they believe occurs in your dreams. And so you could see how easy, Melissa, that psychologists, psychiatrists, people in one of my fields and
Uh-huh.
backgrounds can easily explain this away, because it's some sort of a dream state you're in, and nothing in your dreams is real. Because when you take spirituality out of the mix, why wouldn't you just say it's like any other type of dream? I've had dreams that I go places without my pants on.
Right.
That doesn't mean it happened in real life, right?
Right.
Or there's
Mhm.
that dream where all your teeth fall out. There's all these common dreams that
Oh my
people
gosh,
have.
I've had that experience.
Yeah. And so there's meanings to those. Now,
Hmm.
of course, people say, I know the meaning of that dream, but do they really? Is it something they made up? I don't know. Maybe there's some value to that. It's not really a science of mine. Even when I was going to school to be a psychologist, I never really delved into dream interpretation. It just didn't seem like my cup of tea. It seemed more like a pseudoscience to me. But if people can have these odd dreams and they're not real, you feel like you're falling.
Hmm.
Why can't
Yes.
a seduction demon dream be just a dream and not
Exactly, yeah.
spiritual?
Because when you have those dreams like you're falling, you feel like you're falling, then you hit the bed like
Yeah.
really hard and it
Yeah.
jolts you a little bit. Yeah.
And I mean, they believe they know there's this substance in your brain called acetylcholine that triggers when you're falling, and it gives you that euphoric feeling.
Hmm.
But again, that's what the really smart doctor
Right.
people say. I don't know if that's true, but so
Hmm.
you can see how somebody who is a non-spiritual person would say, well, it's just any other dream. However, I want to kind of take you to our theology here at the Deliverance Project. We are people that believe that we can outline history based off biblical accounts as well as some
Hmm.
extra biblical writings that were sort of commentaries and books that the Bible writers were reading at the time, and piece together what happened in history. Now, Melissa will tell you, I get in arguments a lot with people about this theology, but people will argue like I'm stupid and crazy, but then they have no answers to human history, archaeology.
Hmm.
But what I'm talking about is at least an answer. Maybe
Hmm.
it's not the answer, but I don't really like to argue with people that say, I don't have the answer, but your answer
She's
is wrong.
wrong.
That's like saying 2 + 2 isn't 4. I don't know how to do math, but I know it's
It's
not
not 4.
4.
Hmm.
So at least if they had some sort of theory of their own, it's at least a better argument. But I digress. So when we go back to what we believe at the Deliverance Project, we believe that God, in his perfect relationship, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, existed
Hmm.
before time, before creation. And then he decided to create us. And he created a whole place for us called an earth, a universe, sun, stars, moons, all that stuff.
Hmm.
And somewhere in that creation process, he created us. Now, I don't think it's necessary that we believe that the earth was actually created in 6 days. Was it 6 millenniums? Was it 6 days?
Yeah.
That's not really relevant. But what it says is this: God was a creator, and there's many arguments for creation. Even people that say they don't believe in God believe that there had to be some sort of divine creation event
Hmm.
that caused all this. So,
Right.
they
Yeah.
believe in creation, they just don't want to believe in God. But again, I digress. So we believe that God created this perfect paradise, but he had cast Satan out of heaven, and
Hmm.
Satan was roaming the earth and tempted Adam and Eve, and they fell,
Hmm.
brought sin into the world through their disobedience. And from that, God decided to send angels to kind of watch over mankind as kind of like supervisors, if you will,
Yeah.
to use a corporate term, since Melissa comes from the corporate world. So, these supervisors were supposed to be these kind of God assigned beings that watched over us and helped us.
Hmm.
But we read in the book of Enoch, and something like this is also outlined in Genesis chapter 6, that these angels decided to sin. And
Hmm.
they decided to sin by taking human women and having sex with them and creating these hybrid Nephilim beings that we read about in Genesis chapter 6, these giants, if you will.
Hmm.
And we believe that God had to flood the earth because the human DNA was mostly tainted with this Nephilim DNA. Now, some people argue with me and say, well, where does this even come from? Well, if you go back to the beginnings of Genesis, when Satan tempts Adam and Eve, God says a crazy phrase in there where he says, your seed and her
Hmm.
seed will be at enmity, or will be at odds.
Hmm.
Well, who is the seed of Satan? Well, that's the seed that
Hmm.
would be the angel human DNA. It's
Hmm.
tainted. So much so that God had to send Jesus to be born from a virgin because the woman's DNA, that's her seed, man's seed, male seed is what's tainted. And with sin, with this tainted DNA, with all of that stuff. So that's why Jesus was born of a virgin. And a lot of people have never thought, why did Jesus have to be born of a virgin? Well, it's because of this tainted DNA, this tainted seed. Now, when these Nephilim were killed in the flood, they became the demons that we know about. And so you have to remember that the Bible says there were giants before the flood and after the flood. So these giants were somehow able to reproduce after the flood somehow. Well, we believe here that there's a couple of options to that. Maybe Noah's sons' wives had tainted DNA, possibility. Maybe the Nephilim demons that were now spirit beings were able to relay all of this angel knowledge that their fathers had passed down to them with this sex magic to create more Nephilim. And so the concept of angelic beings or demonic beings having sex with humans goes back to the beginning. So this concept is not new. They're just a title of a succubus. Now, if we go back to the Bible times, we can see that this was even talked about. There's a really obscure passage in Isaiah. And this is something that I want people to really think about, because when you're reading your Bible, this is one of those things that you could skim over real easy, because Isaiah is full of prophecy and it's got all kinds of cool stuff in there. You know, like when you go to Isaiah 53:5 and you read about how this person is going to be beaten, and it's from that beating, from that torture, it says, by his stripes we are healed. It's a forecasting of the crucifixion. So when you start reading that in just 20 chapters before that, we can easily get caught up with this. So when we go to these mysterious kind of verses, we see that there's like these little hidden gems in here. Now watch this. It says in Isaiah 34:14, the wild beasts of the desert shall also meet with the wild beasts of the island. And this translation I'm going to give you says this, but we're going to break it down. Then it says, and the screech owl also shall rest there and find for herself a place of rest. Now, this isn't just talking about these weird screech owls. Some passages will actually say that this is the night creature, or the night bird, or the night owl. But if you have any sort of study Bible or any sort of Bible with footnotes, when you read this passage and you see that term screech owl, you will see a footnote that says this is the demon Lilith. And Lilith is mentioned as the dweller in the waste places. The King James Version of the Bible translates Lilith as the screech owl. This is crazy, Melissa, because in Mexican lore, they have a being called the lechuza. And the lechuza is supposedly an owl-like creature that hides up in the trees and tries to seduce the men. So I will guarantee you, if I met, let's say, 50 people of Mexican culture and said, do you know who the lechuza is? 49, if not all 50 of them will say yes. And maybe one or two will realize that the screech owl in the Bible was Lilith, and that Lilith did the same thing. So in this lore, the screech owl will disguise herself as a beautiful woman and seduce your husband. So this even to this day, you can go on YouTube right now, folks. If you're listening, pause the video or pause this and find the video, or find it after and just look up lechuza and then look at the lore and you'll see how this ties in. Isn't that crazy?
I know.
Now,
I'm gonna have to do that.
the characterization of Lilith as a child slayer or a seducer has a long history all the way back to the Babylonian religion. So the Jews believed that she was the demon Lilith. She had wings and a human face, And she basically was also a destroyer of children, but a seducer of men. And so back to Mesopotamia, they're talking
Yeah.
about this demon, and they're still talking about it today. So this night
Mm-hmm.
creature is
Yeah.
something that we've talked about for a long time. Now, what I want to do before we get to this letter is just kind of go back and really try to hit this home for people, because right now there's some of you listening and you're saying, well, yeah, that's crazy. I'm going to go look up the Lechuza. And I didn't realize Lilith was called the Screech Owl. And I've heard of the Lilith. And wasn't Lilith the first wife of Adam in ancient Jewish kind of mysticism? And yeah, you can do all that study. But let's kind of back up a little bit to the purpose of this podcast, which is about this succubus, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask all of you a question, and I want you to, if you're with somebody listening to this together, don't make eye contact. Just look straight ahead. Like I used to do that when I was a preacher. When you're going to say something controversial, don't look at your wife, don't look at your husband, just look straight ahead. Don't look guilty. But how many of us, if we're honest, have had a dream that was sexual in nature? Like how many of us? Because
yeah, I think everyone.
this minister has.
Right.
This minister has probably had hundreds. I don't know. Now, psychology would say that, there's physiological and biological explanation for these things. But some people would say beyond having sexual type dreams, they have what's called nocturnal emissions, or I think the slang term we used to use when we were kids was wet dreams, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is an adult show, so hopefully we won't take it farther than that, but everybody knows what that means. And these doctors everywhere could say, well, these are just natural human responses, so on and so forth. But I'm going to challenge you that this is also an area that can definitely be a spiritual battleground.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why do I say that? Because I think many people would be shocked at how many of us had had a sexual dream that was demonic in nature. So if you look and said, let's just be a nerd and say, I've had 5 sexual dreams in my life, because I've had way more than that, I'm sure.
Right.
None really come to mind, but you just know you've had them, right? So even if you've had 5, if you could sit there and break them down, what was the nature of these dreams? Now, some people would say, well, I had a dream about a friend and I had sex with them in the dream. Psychology would say, well, maybe you have a secret attraction to that person. Or even if you're not attracted to that person, you feel close to them. And in your dream, you took that intimacy to the ultimate level. But sometimes these dreams are odd and very seductive and very graphic, and maybe even very almost like out of character for you. And everybody's sex is different, so I'm not going to go down that path, but just out of character for you, yet you're having this dream. So I would say that a lot of people would be shocked that you've had some sort of sexual encounter with a demonic entity, because this is a spiritual battleground. And I'm gonna kind of pause here and say, like, Melissa, before you met me, you had some semblance of a normal life where we didn't talk about all these weird spiritual concepts. But has that something you've ever heard in your life where some of your sexual dreams could or might be demonic?
I actually, now that when you were saying that, I had a friend of mine that would say that she would have these dreams, and it started out, like you said, a normal dream, like a romantic dream, and it was, nice and everything and pleasurable. And then she said it turned almost like violent. It wasn't fun and pleasant anymore, that it turned more, but I didn't know anything about, now this was probably 20 years ago. I didn't know anything about having those type dreams, that it could be demonic. I mean, I've heard of succubus and things like that, but I really not educated on the, too in depth about it. But I I haven't personally, thank God, had any of those type dreams. But I've heard of people having, those dreams, but I just didn't know what it was. I thought it was just went from a nice dream to a nightmare is how I would have taken it.
Well,
Not to think of, like
and I
of
love that you
anything
said
else.
that, because that's
Mhm.
what everybody would say. Well, it was just a nice dream
Nightmare.
that turned into a nightmare.
Hmm.
But I would challenge you to say that the odds are drastically in the favor of that was a demonic
But
dream.
now looking back at what she was going through, wondering if that's something, the drinking, the partying, the drug, you know, sleeping
As
around,
we
doing other
say, she was
things.
opening the doors of her life to the demons, and they're
Hmm.
always trying to gain deeper and deeper entry.
But I never thought of a demon this way. I've always pictured it as something else. But yeah,
Wow.
good.
And
Good
so,
show. Thank you.
so this is something that we really need to consider. Now I'm going to take it a step
Hmm.
deeper, and then we're going to get to this letter here. But
Okay.
I'm gonna go like, so we're at, psychology, spirituality 201. Now let's maybe go to 301, or maybe
Okay.
even 401. There is a concept that people have mostly never heard of or never considered, but this is the fact that you can actually have a sexual relationship with a demon in your dreams and sometimes in person. And this is a concept that those of us who are in deliverance ministry would call a spiritual spouse.
Hmm.
Now, this is a very kind of intricate, kind of no way is that true type of subject.
Hmm.
This is where skeptics go, okay, dude, I was willing to hear about the Nephilim building pyramids and,
Right.
setting up temples so they can be gods on earth. But I'm not really sure about this spiritual spouse thing.
Hmm.
But I can tell you countless stories, and you can research countless stories of people that would say not only could they summon some sort of like transcendental meditation where they can have sex with somebody laying in their bed while the other person was laying in their bed, or that they had a sexual dream about, like one story I can think of about an ex-wife, and the ex-wife called and said, "Hey, I'm creeped out because I had such a weird sexual dream about you that it almost seemed real." And then they compare, and they both
Hmm.
had the same
Hmm.
dream.
I've heard of that. Hmm.
So there's something that goes on in our what psychology would call our subconscious, or
Hmm.
in our dream state, that goes on. So why couldn't you have some sort of a sexual relationship with a demon? Because let's face it, and I'm going to
Hmm.
say something very controversial. We all have some sort of relationship with some sort of demons in our lives.
Hmm.
Even
Hmm.
those of
I
us in
believe that.
deliverance,
Yeah.
we could pray deliverance over somebody, and the next day, some demon's working on us,
Hmm.
and we're entertaining the thoughts, or we're turning our eyes from God and going down some path of some sort of addiction, or a seduction type of a thing where we're
Hmm.
being drawn away.
Hmm.
You're in some sort of a relationship with a demon where you're hearing the voice, you're being influenced. Again, we will always say that you're responsible for your own actions, but I believe in my heart of hearts that people can be in a sexual relationship with a demon in their dreams and otherwise. We did a bonus episode, I think maybe towards season one, season two. So it's been, quite a ways back. But we did a bonus episode about Doris Bithers, the
Hmm.
original
Hmm.
person who they made the movie The Entity about.
Hmm.
And The
Yeah.
Entity, even I think it was the early 80s.
Hmm.
I mean, it was pretty sexually graphic movie where they were actually showing a demon sexually assaulting a woman.
Hmm.
And this story is a real story.
Hmm.
And so that went from dream to reality. But this is a sexual relationship. Now, I'm not saying that in a sense that it's consensual at all,
Right. Exactly.
although there are some people that want it to be, but that's
Hmm.
pretty rare. This is just a demon using this avenue to get to you. I think people who are prone to sexual sin, and you can put me in there, I'm not judging anybody, are probably more open to a spirit like this because the demons will come where our weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
I've said this 1,000 times and I'll say it again. One of my biggest weaknesses is anger. So if a demon's going to come to me, it's going to come through anger or when
Mm-hmm.
I'm angry. That's when
Mm-hmm.
I'm the most vulnerable. But and I also have other weaknesses. But what's a weakness
Mm-hmm.
for one person may not be a weakness for another person. But if this is your weakness, that's where it's going to come. If you're an alcoholic, the demon's going to come through. That's why they call the
Mm-hmm.
spirits, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're alcohol spirits.
Here's the spirit store.
Yeah, they're going to come to you through that. If you are somebody who is, a jealous person, the demons are going to
Mm-hmm.
inspire jealousy and then try to gain entry when you're nice and jealous.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are they going to do when your sexuality and sexual sin is in the forefront? That's where they're going to make their play. So,
That is
again,
crazy that you said that. I'm sorry, but I was trying to find this podcast is pastor out of Atlanta, Georgia, and there was a young lady that was speaking about the same thing. And when you said you can have a relationship for years, I think she said hers started when she was about 19 till she was about 26. That these things would keep happening, and then it started out like very nice, and she would welcome it, and then all of a sudden it turned, to evil and something very violent. But and then she went into her whole story. It was really interesting. But wow, I'd have never thought that it could be, but I guess the same thing, like demons can start out, baby steps, and then all of a sudden it's full blown for years. So it doesn't just happen overnight sometimes.
well, the
And she
Bible,
was telling her struggle and what she was going through, and
sure.
you know, abandoned by her mom and her dad and things like that, and trying to find herself, and being used and
Weak in a
weak.
weakened
Yeah.
state.
Mhm.
Well, the Bible talks about, God visiting people in their dreams or some sort of positive spiritual encounter.
I've had that.
And demons and Satan are just mockers of God.
Mhm.
Satan has created nothing of his own. He just does the counter action to what God does,
Mhm.
or mocks it or mimics it. So God made Jesus a blood sacrifice for our sins because in the
Mhm.
Old Testament you had to give a blood sacrifice of a lamb or a bull or a ram. Well, what does Satan require? Blood sacrifices. If you watch,
A human, yeah.
paranormal shows or even true crime shows where they talk about satanic rituals,
Mhm.
they're offering up blood to
Yeah.
Satan. Satan does nothing original.
That
It's
is crazy to have that happen for years.
it is,
Experience.
and so just like a lot. See, here's what I would say to that. Some of us will look at her and go, "How could you allow that to happen for years?" Yet I'm in some sin that I've been dealing with for years that can't let
Mhm.
go of. All of us have sin. That's why we don't like religious people here, listeners, because
Yeah.
they'll call out all of your sins, but they got some secret one up in the closet that they hope never comes out.
Yeah.
Because all of us struggle somewhere. Even the Apostle Paul said he had some
Mhm.
sort of thorn in his flesh and he prayed for God to take it away. And God said no. Most of us believe that that was some sort of a spiritual type of a thing that he couldn't let go of,
Yeah.
that it wasn't actually a thorn that could not be surgically removed from
Mhm.
his side. So,
But she
uh,
finally got rid of it. She went to a deliverance, and now she's, helping other people with her story. But it was a long struggle for her. It was really
yeah.
interesting. So
And people can
can't
have
wait to
people can have demons for years, for their whole lives.
Mhm.
And um whether people believe that a Christian could be possessed, that's an argument for another show. But
Mhm.
Christians can definitely have demonic attachments, that are plaguing you.
Mhm.
And they can be God-fearing, loving Christians, but they just have an area or two that they can't seem to break free of. Well, that's where your attachment
Exactly.
is, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay.
So let's get down to business here. So those of us who have done deliverance, I would say almost all of us have had some sort of an encounter where we had to pray away a spirit spouse or a demonic attachment that was kind of intimate and sexual in nature away from people. I could think of a couple stories, but time is kind of escaping us here.
Mhm.
And so, Melissa, you've kind of shared with us, this is a terrifying concept, but on the same token, it's more common than we think.
Yeah, it
Any
is.
final thoughts on that? Because you've had some good feedback today on before we get to this letter.
Let's just get to the letter. Like I I don't want to give too much away because I did have a chance to look at the show notes before and like but that lady, she popped in my head and I
Yeah.
was trying to find it. But yeah, it was really interesting that that it just was with her for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Now,
it's pretty much I wouldn't say exactly, but very, very much like the letter that we're about to read. And it was terrifying. It made my hair stand up on the back of my neck because I felt so bad for her. I mean, she was terrified and like it just affected her life in so many different ways for years. But I'm glad she found deliverance and she's all better now. But
yeah,
we're
freedom.
into freedom
Yeah.
from the struggle.
There you go.
Okay.
So let's jump to it. This letter says, Anthony and Melissa. This is anonymous, by the way, so I won't have a name here, but
Yep.
it says, I recently found your podcast and I'm intrigued by what you guys are trying to do. I am someone who believes that the world has been deceived into believing that demons are not real. I can say with 100% certainty that they are real. I know that many will not believe, but I feel that by sharing my story, I may help someone who also feels like their story is unbelievable. And let's just pause there and say, thank you so much, listener. I hope you're listening to this. If you wrote in, I hope you're sitting there wondering if we would read your letter, and we definitely are. But I would say this, that we don't care what the world thinks, and people who don't want to believe, that's their right. But you are 100% correct. Tell your story, because for every 10 people that won't listen or won't believe, 1 or 2 people might be sitting there going, I needed to hear that. And that doesn't just go for this letter. That goes for anybody who's thinking about writing into us or calling us. So he goes on to say, about 7 years ago, I went through deliverance ministry at a church in California, and I feel that it saved my life. Let me explain. I will not give you my name, but I am a 42-year-old man. I'm just a normal guy. There's not really anything special about me at all. I work for an insurance company as an actuary. And that is a pretty boring job. I'm not picking on this guy, but I mean, that's about as normal as it gets. I was not raised in a religious family, but I did not consider myself an atheist. So this is somebody who maybe would be agnostic, thinks there's something, maybe whatever, but
Right. Yeah.
but he's not an atheist. So he says that. I think I always believed in something, but I just didn't seem to care enough to pursue faith. About a year prior to my deliverance, I had a very bad addiction to pornography. I had been divorced for about 2 years and had no interest in getting remarried. I didn't want the hassle of a relationship, but I was still into sex. I started going on random dates, but I ended up just reverting to porn as a long-term solution to my sexual appetite. And I can imagine what he's saying here is, you're a little bit older and you just want to have sex and not relationships. People of his like age probably aren't into that. So if
And if he's
it's
dating someone a little younger, she may want to get married and never
yeah.
been married. And it's like, whoa.
So porn was working, is what I hear him saying.
Yeah.
So I was into some very disgusting stuff because it seemed like it took more and more to satisfy me. And that's the nature of pornography. It starts out probably very simple and turns into where you have to have more and more shocking things to get you aroused or whatever.
Yeah.
So then one night I had a very illicit dream. It's not that I had never had sexual dreams before. This one was just different. The woman in my dream was very beautiful and what I would consider the perfect specimen of a woman. I know that sounds objectifying, but that is what I thought at the time. The encounter was very detailed and realistic. That is when the dream took a horrible turn. So, kind of what we were talking about a little while ago. In the dream, the woman turned into the most hideous creature. In the dream, I was terrified and wanted the encounter to end. The creature had complete control. And I kind of just like this letter, the way this person wrote this, because the previous sentence, it was a woman. Now it's a creature. Yeah. I do not want to get graphic, but I feel like I was being assaulted. It went from pleasurable to terrifying. So, kind
Just
of
like,
what that other lady was saying for sure.
hmm
When the demon was finished with me, she told me that I now belonged to her.
that's exactly what the lady said. The male told her.
Yeah. Well, it's a common
Come
theme.
and yeah, it's yes.
For our friends and listeners and kind of our little family here,
Wow.
I'm sure there's some of you who are not believers, or maybe you just like the paranormal content, or you're curious. I understand the skeptic. I understand the people that see, they only believe what they see type of
hmm
thing. But at some point, when there's people all over the world sharing the same story, you can possibly say, well, they heard the first story and then they all just repeat their own version of it. But there's too many stories all over the world, different countries, different places that have almost the exact same story of these creatures doing that to people. That's proof.
And this will be hard to kind of mimic, to try to recreate your own. Like, I would not, this is not something I would just make up and tell someone, and it's very detailed and very, like, oh, I had a dream that I was falling off of a cliff. That's common. But to go into something like this, into detail and how
Well,
it's happening.
let's talk about evidence for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So people would say, I only believe what I see. So let's say, for example, there was a murder on the corner right by our condo complex here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked out the window because I heard somebody screaming. And I saw a white male with a kind of blondish beard and a Denver Nuggets beanie, wearing an orange coat. And he turned and he had a scar on the right side of his face.
Mm-hmm.
And I called the police and said, this guy just murdered this woman. And then 5 other neighbors came out and said, I saw the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that evidence?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not evidence. There's not a video. The jury doesn't get to watch the crime happen. The jury
Yeah.
gets 5 accounts
Counts.
from
Mhm.
separate people. Now, what would make that enough evidence to convict this man of that murder?
The scar on his face.
Well, it's the commonality of the
Yeah,
story.
Mhm.
So when people say, I only believe what I see, that's not really true. That's something
Mhm.
people say because they don't want to go down the path of, is there a God or not? You believe in a lot of things you don't see,
Mhm.
but it's something that people, I respect it because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
honest. I would
Exactly.
rather
Yeah, he's
people
being
not
very
fake a
honest.
religion or hate
Uh-huh.
religion. I'd rather
Mhm.
people just say that. But for those of you who are listening, for Melissa to have a story that she was just looking at online X amount of time ago, and this
Mhm.
person to write in this letter with almost the exact same story, but
Mhm.
more importantly, her and I and all of you listeners could shut off this podcast right now and go start searching this topic, and
Mhm.
you're going to find a million stories
Mhm.
because this stuff happens.
Mhm.
Again, let's jump back to the letter. So this thing said he now belonged to her. He said, when I woke up, I had experienced what is called a nocturnal emission. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. He says, I'm not sure if you know what that means, but I had an orgasm in my sleep. And unfortunately, I have talked about this with countless people during deliverance ministry. It's very common,
Mhm.
whoever wrote this letter. So, with all seriousness, I knew then that the dream was real and that I had been assaulted by a demon. I knew what a succubus was, and I knew that this is what the creature was. So he had heard of the concept of a succubus, but now
Mhm.
he knew this is what he had actually encountered. Now, he goes on to say, I told a friend, and as you can expect, he told me that I was making a big deal out of nothing. This part of the letter just, I don't know if it made me laugh or made me mad. He says, this idiot even told me that I should invite it to come back. He actually thought it was something to be happy about. So I kind of picture that kind of buddy that's kind of like
Like, yeah, man, I had this
a
dream. He's like,
perv. Yeah.
yeah,
And
let
like,
me have one.
yeah, like no concept that this is dangerous, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, he kind of just leaves it at that. And he says, after that, I just kept to myself, which means if you're going to tell people and they're not going to believe you, that's what most of you who we want you to call in, you've never been able to find somebody who fully believes you. And this is what happens when you tell people, right? They mock it or make fun of it or whatever. So it took about 2 months before it happened again. This time it was way more violent and violating. So now this thing has him. It doesn't need to pretend to be a woman. It just is what it is. I was not in control and it was horrific, he says. I started to seek help with clergy, but I was either met with disbelief or with inexperience. I wanted to give up. And let me pause here again. If you are somebody who's visited a clergy member, a priest, a pastor, a minister, and they don't believe you or they don't know what they're doing, don't quit. Don't let that be an excuse for you not to get help. There is plenty of us out there in the world that do this. I will take the time again. There is a pastor, and I need to one day make sure this is okay, but I'm sure he wouldn't fight me on this or sue me for it. But there is a pastor, I think it's out of California, by the name of Isaiah Saldivar.
Yeah.
And he has something called the Deliverance Map. .com or .org. I can't remember which one it is, and I should have looked it up, but you can go there and find deliverance ministers in your area all over the world. So don't give up. If you go to your local church,
thank God he did not give up.
If you go to your local church and they don't know what to do, find that. But don't give up.
Something was wrong. Yeah.
Because the demon will tell you, see, nobody believes you. The church can't help you, that type of thing. So then he says, then the activity went from dream to reality. One night while I was watching television on my couch, I was assaulted by an unseen entity. I can tell you with all certainty that I was wide awake. I even had an orgasm. I cried and cried. That kind of makes me sad. I have never felt more helpless in my life. For some reason, when it happened outside of my dream, it was way worse. And I would say it is way worse, even though you may feel the same when it's over. At least if it's in a dream, you could kind of keep making excuses for it. But when it's in real life, I mean, it's real. It was real before.
So like when it's in the daylight.
Yeah. When it was real before, but now it's
really real.
Inarguable, right? So he says, I began researching about this topic and was able to find a church that had a deliverance ministry. I went to a service and came to the front at the end of the service. So I probably did some sort of an altar call where they said, if you need any sort of prayer. So he said it took several people and about 15 minutes for the demons to come out of me. The minister believed that I had many demons in me and that the succubus demon was the most powerful. This story has a happy ending because my life completely turned around after that. I have never viewed another pornographic image, and good for you. Good for you. I have committed my life to Jesus. I even got married 3 years ago. I am happy and grateful that I found the church. And more importantly, I am grateful that Jesus saved me. I just thought this story could help some of your listeners. If you have had an encounter like this, find a deliverance ministry and pray. Don't let it get so far out of control that you can't come back. Keep doing what you're doing. I will pray for your program and your ministry. In Jesus, Anonymous. So, yay. Melissa, what do you think?
Like I said, I totally believe it. When I heard that lady's story, it was so similar to this one. And I'm sure it sounds like that this happened to him for a couple of years, that it's something that just didn't stop, like right away. And I'm glad that he didn't stop, that he found the church and someone that believed him, and they were able to do a deliverance over him and get rid of those demons. And, he's not watching porno anymore. And I'm glad he's got married and found Jesus and that he's happy. So that's just his journey.
It is a happy ending for sure.
And I'm glad it is. That's exciting.
I look at this story.
But it's so scary I can't imagine going through anything like that.
Well, it's terrifying. But and I think the scariest part of it, Melissa, is you could tell 3,000 people and one of them will believe you. Like it is so unbelievably outlandish or fantastical that people would say, oh, that, I saw that on a movie or I saw the entity too, but this stuff happens a lot.
Yeah, it does.
And And I'm going to tell you this, that demons, as I said earlier, will come where your weaknesses are. And it is something that is very real to a lot of people. I could just off the top of my head probably count a dozen people that I have prayed for deliverance. I mean, I mean literally off the top of my head, give you explicit details about these cases
Mm-hmm.
because they had very similar stories to this. Some of these had gone on for many years.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, I could think of one woman in particular where she actually enjoyed it for the first probably 2 or 3 dozen encounters
Mm-hmm.
before it actually became violent. And
Mm-hmm.
then you kind of feel like the shame and the embarrassment. So you imagine having to come to a church and say,
Exactly. Yeah.
I've been entertaining this demon. I invited it to have sex with me. Now it's gotten violent. Now I
Mm-hmm.
need help.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, for people like me, I'm like, all right, well, let's get this done. Are you
Exactly.
ready to give your life to
Yep.
Jesus? But they maybe have gone to several friends, family, psychologists, whatever, and got told, well, this is a concept, because I think of a lot of the psychology colleagues that I've had in my life that mock this type of stuff. And although they try not to mock you directly to your face, people
Mm-hmm.
can feel your vibe and
Oh
your
yeah,
energy.
exactly.
And so when they finally find somebody to believe them, they're relieved.
Mm-hmm.
And then, then that's when the battle starts, because then the demons want to, you know, turn the screws and
Mm-hmm.
really put you under the shame and guilt microscope in yourself, even though the people that are praying for you don't judge you
Uh-huh.
at all. And and I've said this 1,000 times. There's been many, many times during deliverance ministries where demons will call out things that myself and my team have done
Mm-hmm.
that are embarrassing. So I would just tell the family, see, you were embarrassed to call us, but we're all humans, right? So now you know all of our secrets. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
keep yours, you keep mine, and let's keep going type thing, because demons are evil that way.
And like you said, it brings on that shame and embarrassment. So there's other issues that you're having because you're ashamed of what you initially thought was okay. And then come to find out that it was an actual, not a very nice demon.
Well,
So it's
none of
just
them are
kind of,
nice.
yeah.
Just remember, though, secrets keep you sick.
Yep.
And that's what the
Mm-hmm.
demons prey on.
Mm-hmm.
It's exposing your secrets and telling your story,
Mm-hmm.
your true
Yeah.
story, your
Yep.
truth, that gets people to find that freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to share a personal story. So probably back in, I would guess, maybe the early 2000s, not quite the mid 2000s. Um, I had a person come to the church that I worked at and asked me to go to the house to pray for their family. They
Mm-hmm.
actually believed that there was a demon that was possessing the mom and the daughter. And so they were like people full of questions, like, is there two demons, is there one demon,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, well, there's probably multiple demons. Now who's
Right.
possessed and who's not, I don't know. I sat down with this person in my office for probably about 2 hours. They had originally booked a kind of a pastoral counseling session.
Mm-hmm.
I actually canceled the appointment after them and rescheduled it because I could see, because after
Mm-hmm.
my first handful of questions, I was like, this is not mental health.
Right.
This is something spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of saw the demon behind her eyes a little bit. So I agreed to go to the house, and I embellished this story in my first book entitled The Struggle. In chapter 5, I tell the story of being visited by a succubus. But this is kind of just an embellishment of what really happened. So, what I had decided to do that day was go to a local bookstore that was up the road. It was kind of a smaller bookstore. It wasn't one of the big ones that I
Mm-hmm.
won't mention the name, although I love those too. It was just a smaller local bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
And just off the bookstore, they were building like this little community, almost like a park, but it had more. It was just like tables and seating area, and it had like an awning in case it was real sunny.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was nobody out that day. It was probably 2 o'clock and not noon when everybody would be out there eating their food, because
Mm-hmm.
it was, there was a food court, so people would get their food on their lunch break and go eat there. Well, at 2 o'clock, nobody was there.
Right.
And it was kind of in the trees a little bit, kind of just off the buildings. Kind of, you went down this little path and then you were there. It was pretty isolated. And while I was sitting at that table, this stunningly beautiful woman came walking up the path, but not from the part where the buildings were, a part where the path like kind of goes down. I've never gone down there. I didn't
Mhm.
know what was down there. I didn't
Mhm.
even know if there was anything down there. Uh, and I never saw anybody come from there. And I'd sat at those tables 50 times.
Mhm.
Well, this woman came up, sat at my table, and just was very aggressively sexual towards me. And I have to be transparent here and say, when somebody who is stunningly beautiful, like breathtakingly beautiful, comes up to you, there's that nervousness that you get
Mhm.
anyway. But when this person, what are you doing? Well, I'm just kind of praying. And well, what do you do? I'm a minister. Where at? Well, at this local church right here. Well, are you a minister who keeps their vows, or are you kind of a one that plays around? And you're like, what? It's shocking, but big mouth me, who has an answer for everything, I kind of was tongue tied because I didn't know what to say. Should I be aggressive? Should I say, get the F away from me? Should
Mhm.
I get up and run? Like, I didn't know what to do. And probably through about 30 or 40 seconds of this conversation, it hit me. And
Mhm.
I said, hey, demon, not today. And this woman kind of sat back. And when I tell you this, most of you aren't going to believe me. When she sat back, almost leaning completely away from the table with no back on the
Mhm.
back of the table, almost like she was going to fall backwards,
Mhm.
her face changed. She wasn't that beautiful woman anymore. She was more like a hag
Mhm.
type woman. And her response to me was, you better not pray for that family. And she got up and walked back down the path. And I watched every ounce of her walk away. And her walk went from a graceful walk to like a hobble
Mhm.
and disappeared into the trees. And I have had demons come to me, tell me not to pray for people, heard the
Mhm. Yeah, you said
voices,
that.
different things. Melissa and I have even experienced where things are happening in the house or in our lives, and we say it's because we're praying for this family or that
Mhm.
family. But this was like an overt type of an attack on me.
Mhm.
And I really had to go home and get myself ready and pray. Um, I really had to get myself straight because I felt in that moment like this demon knows my weakness,
Mhm.
and it will come for me because it doesn't want to lose its grip on this family.
Mhm.
So I went and prayed for this family, and what turned out to be was that the mom was in some sort of a same-sex type of an affair, and the woman that she was in an affair with was, uh, I would say, demonized, definitely into witchcraft and things like that. So she
Oh.
was the one that was putting this on the family. So during this deliverance ministry, I would call it an evening, definitely wasn't an event. This woman had to come clean about this affair to her husband and to her kids. And they weren't kids, they were, mid teens, late teens,
Mhm.
but this all had to come out. And then we prayed. And the team that I was with, um, when we heard the screech that echoed through the house and a door slam, that's when we knew it was over. And
Mhm.
so in my story in the book, I talk about the screech in the woods, but this was the true story as it happened. So these things will come for you, and they'll
Mhm.
come for you in your dreams. They'll come for you in your nightmares, if you will, but they most of the time will come as an almost a pleasant experience. Now,
Mhm.
here's the
Yeah.
question to us. If you have these dreams, what is the difference between a demon coming to you in your dream and then you literally accepting a spirit spouse? Well, my question to you would be, and not just to you, Melissa, although I'm going to ask you directly, to all of you listeners, is what do you do with those dreams when you wake up from them, those sexual dreams? Because is your first instinct to pray, or is your first instinct to go, well, that was kind of cool?
um, I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. I mean, I've had, a couple sexual dreams, but not a lot. So I mean, now knowing what I know, it would be totally different than okay, yeah. So now I know what I'm knowing. I would handle it totally different. I would, pray it away. Um, for whatever it is. But I mean, just my personal experience, I haven't experienced a lot of it. So, but now that I know what it is, most definitely would, bring it to you, and, you and I can pray, together. And yeah, that is not a good thing.
Well, let's
I
make
don't know if
this.
that's a good answer or not, but
No, it's
I
an
don't know
amazing answer because it's
I don't know what to
honest.
say. Yeah.
Here's the deal, okay? Let's make this real simple for the listeners. If you're having a sexual dream about your spouse, you're probably all right,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you're having a sexual dream about something else, why wouldn't you treat it as if it was real life? So if you're not supposed to cheat in real life, why would you entertain these sexual thoughts beyond just what they were when you woke up and say that was a demon making a play for me?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if the dream you're having is about somebody maybe you personally know,
Mm-hmm.
because then that could be the demon pushing you towards that affair. Or if it's
Oh
about
yeah. 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 Yeah.
some sort of mysterious person that you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably even more indicative of the fact that it's a demon. What
Oh,
this guy
very
said in
good.
this letter that I don't know if any of you paid attention to, and if you did, you probably were offended. He said this was the perfect specimen of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So a demon who was influencing this man to watch pornography and viewed it with him and encouraged him probably knew exactly what he thought was
Was
the
it
perfect
perfect?
specimen.
Mm-hmm.
So that should have been the indication that it was a demon. So again, if you wake up
Oh
from a
yeah.
sexual dream and it wasn't about your spouse, and I may sound like prude, but
Right. Yeah. I
you
mean,
should pray
we're
for
not.
that
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to open the door to that. But if
Mm-hmm.
some of us are honest, if it was a very pleasant kind of sexual experience in your dream, I think most of us would say, well, it was just a dream,
Dream.
so it was all
Right.
right. But that could be opening the door to this type of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Because I don't
Again,
dream a lot.
yeah, you said
Yeah.
that
I don't.
before. I
Yeah.
dream all the time, every time, crazy dreams. But I think I fight a lot of spiritual battles in my
Mm-hmm.
dreams. But I would say this: if this is something that you as a listener have struggled with, you really want to kind of consider going to see a deliverance minister or a minister that will pray for you. And even if you have to introduce the concept of a spirit spouse to them.
Mm-hmm.
But if this has happened on multiple occasions, or you feel like you were, asleep on the couch and you felt like something was touching you in the wrong way,
Mm-hmm.
or if you felt like even the movie The Entity, where you could feel the thing grabbing your private parts in
Mm-hmm.
while you were awake or while you're asleep, pray it away before you let it progress.
Mm-hmm.
Because sexuality is a crazy thing, because it is a very physical response.
Mm-hmm.
When
Yeah.
you are like, so let's take the concept of a sin, like theft. You're probably stealing because you need money for something. Some people will steal because they need to pay their rent.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will steal because they need to buy drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But when you steal, there could be some euphoric feeling to it, but it is to meet a need.
Right.
So the physical response of just an adrenaline dump might feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're in sexual sin, there is an actual physical pleasure response that's
Mm-hmm.
triggered.
Yeah.
And so sexual sin is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, if not arguably, the most difficult sin to overcome,
Mm-hmm.
because it does something. The Bible, I think we said it last week or a couple of weeks ago, the Bible says that sexual sin is the only sin that you commit inside of your
Such.
body.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, people want to kind of debate that, but when you really put your thought to it, it's because
Mm-hmm.
it's different.
Yeah.
And so many people are taken down, ministers and everybody else, by sexual sin.
Mm-hmm.
Families are destroyed by affairs,
Mm-hmm.
not just husband and wives, kids and everybody.
Yeah.
Ministries are lost.
Yeah.
People can go to jail for different sort of sexual crimes that are driven. And some of those are more power and control based, but still there's a sexual component to these.
Mm-hmm.
Sexual sin is a very slippery slope that can progress very fast. And Sometimes the demons will just use that sin to get you on your own path of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And then some demons who I believe want to possess you because they used to have bodies when they were Nephilim
Yeah,
creatures and they want a body
exactly.
back.
Mm-hmm.
They want to get in you and possess you. And that's where this a succubus or an incubus will make
Ah,
their move. I mean, there's a famous old painting when you Google incubus. I mean, you'll find it. It'll probably be the first thing on your search. An old painting of this little demonic creature sitting on a woman's chest while
chest
she's laying in bed.
bed. Mm-hmm.
As soon as I was saying it, Melissa knew exactly
Yep.
what I was talking about. This is an ancient picture. This wasn't
Mm-hmm.
painted in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
People have been talking about this concept forever. So
Yep.
let's close with
Very
this.
good.
Let's close
Whew.
with this. If you're somebody who feels like you are into some sort of spirit spouse situation, or you just have a demon in general, maybe it's coming at you from a completely different avenue. Hopefully you're hearing that this is the place for you. There's no judgment here. Never once did we say, well, this is what you get, clown, for looking at porn,
Exactly.
because
No.
many people look at porn
Mm-hmm.
and many people don't go through this.
Mm-hmm.
The consequences may come in a different fashion.
Right.
So, Mr. Anonymous, whoever you are, thank you so much for your bravery.
Exactly.
And I
Yeah.
do believe you'll be an inspiration, because even if people don't have this story, they might have a story. And
Mm-hmm.
because you were so bold and so transparent and so honest,
Mm-hmm.
that I think maybe they would do the same. Because as you said, don't let these things progress.
Exactly.
That's why
Yeah.
we want your stories in the early stages, not the
Mm-hmm.
late. We
Mm-hmm.
want to help you find deliverance from the spiritual battle that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And spoiler alert, if you're listening to this and say, I don't think I'm really into spiritual battle, I'm going to tell you two things. You probably are.
Mm-hmm.
You just haven't realized where that battle is. And if you're not, enjoy the break, do some
Right.
push-ups, because it's coming. We all go through it. And
Mm-hmm.
when we do, we want a place where we can go and be heard and understood and not judged. And that's what we do here at the Deliverance Project.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if you are somebody who feels that this is a place for you, that you can get the help that you need, reach out to us, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But I want to say a prayer for anybody who's listening to this, just that they might be inspired to reach out to us or somebody for help.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Father God, I thank you so much for this person's willingness to share this crazy paranormal story that has a happy ending, but definitely was not happy while he was going through it, God. I just thank you that you were there. I thank you that you're a God that's always there, and that if we would just hear your voice, you will guide us to the right place. God, your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path if we will simply just open our eyes to you, God. So I just pray that people who are listening that have a story of their own, doesn't have to be about an incubus or a succubus, God, but they have a story of their own and they don't know where to turn. God, guide them to the right place, please, God, whether it's with us or whether it's some local church or some ministry that they found online or some pastor that they could start listening to on YouTube videos. God, the world is so different. We can get your word heard in so many different ways nowadays, God, that just let these people find the right avenue to meet you in the most intimate way, and you could bring them that freedom from the struggle that they're in. God, I pray for this person that they would continue to be able to find that happiness in you and in his new marriage and in his new life, and that he wouldn't be tempted to go back to the old. But more importantly, God, I pray that you would bless him for being the one that would go first and tell a story like this. So, God, I just pray for all of us that you would always be there for us in our spiritual battles. And we know that you will, because your promises are always true and are always fervent and are always faithful. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So we want to thank you again for joining us. I want to remind you that if you are interested in some additional paranormal content, you could find us on our second podcast at the Struggle series. That is a series where you could listen to all three of the books in the Struggle series in their entirety, with a couple of spooky stories woven in between the chapters. You can also check us out on all the socials. Hopefully TikTok doesn't get banned on tomorrow. We're recording on a Saturday night, but if it does, I think our incoming
Rumble.
president said that he
Yeah.
might be, trying to find a way to bring it back. But If not, we're on all the other socials. You can check those out in the show notes. We want to remind you that this program is copyright The Struggle LLC. All our voiceover work is done by Todd K. Voiceovers. Check him out if you're interested in that kind of work. He is the easiest guy to work with on the history of the planet. To find out more about us, you can go to thestruggleseries.com. You can find out about Melissa and I, about the books, about everything we got going on there. And if you're so kind and you want to help out this ministry or this podcast, not really a formal ministry, but if you want to help us out to keep this podcast alive, there's even a donate button there. You can buy the first 2 books in the Struggle series there at a discounted rate. And lastly, if you are somebody with a story of your own, you want to write to us, you want to send us an audio file, or you want to request an interview with us, or just a conversation with us, you can reach us at the Deliverance Project Podcast at gmail.com. So we hope to see you soon. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to The Deliverance Project. Make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, and we will see you next time.